To oversimplify what it takes to be a successful NFL franchise, you gotta do these two things well. Number one, you must bring in the right management, from the owner down to GM, scouts, coaches, training staff, etc. And number two, you must bring in the right players, from veteran leadership to young talent to role players. But at some point, keeping together a good team becomes a huge challenge because of the cap limit. You can't just pay every good player the contract they deserve, or else you quickly run into cap issues. So, one of the most common ways for a team to stay relevant that doesn't pay too much for talent is they must draft well. Thinking about this idea, it led me to this question: which NFL franchise has consistently drafted the best, and which has drafted the worst? Some of the information I found surprised me, like what the average NFL pick from each round is worth. I found the single greatest draft by any team in recent memory, and also the most pathetic. We will dive into all of that shortly, but really quickly, a word from today's sponsor, SeatGeek. With over 28 million downloads, SeatGeek has more than 70,000 events available every single day, including concerts, festivals, and sports. Times are pretty wild over here in Sacramento, with the Kings in the NBA playoffs, and I'm thinking I need to be a part of that epic playoff atmosphere while they play Golden State. SeatGeek always wants to make sure that you're getting a good deal, so when you're on the app, look for the green dots. Green means good and red means bad. Every ticket is backed by their buyer guarantee, and SeatGeek is the only site that lets you return your tickets ahead of the event with swaps. And you know I came through for you guys. Use my code KTO for $20 off tickets at SeatGeek. That's $20 off your first purchase with promo code KTO. Make sure you click the link in the description to download the app. So, how do we quantify exactly who drafted the best and the worst? Well, I'm using a few sources I found online, mainly information from this ESPN article published back in 2022. Taking a closer look at how they measured players, ESPN ranked teams based on each draftee's career approximate value. Now, what does this mean exactly? Approximate value, or a player's AV, is Pro Football Reference's method of measuring the performance of every NFL player, from individual seasons to the entirety of their career. No surprise, Tom Brady is the all-time leader in this category, and the greatest single season was LaDainian Tomlinson's 26 AV back in 2006. So, beginning with 2012, ESPN took each drafted player's career AV and measured it against a value based on where that player was taken in the draft. If a team's first-round pick did better than the average first-round pick, they received a positive number, and if they did worse, a negative number. To give you an idea of how each round differs in career AV and production, I used the 2000 NFL Draft as a reference. This is a good visual for showing the slow decline in production from round to round. You can see just how much more valuable first-rounders are, as it produced more starters than the 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th rounds combined. Going back to that ESPN article, here is the landscape of NFL franchises in regards to their draft performance since 2012. At the top, the Seattle Seahawks reigned supreme as the best NFL draft performers, with the single greatest class possibly of all time. Now, even though Seattle has the edge statistically as the best drafting team, Kansas City makes a strong case that they could be better, as every class they've had has been above average since 2012, including the best player in the NFL currently, the best 5th rounder, and the best tight end in the league. But now to get to why you may have clicked on this video, here is the worst NFL draft performers in recent history. No surprise, the Browns are near dead last in this category. They consistently underperform in the NFL draft, and their 2014 first round is arguably the worst of all time, considering they took 2 guys and both of them were out of the league in 3 years. However, the New York Jets take the number 1 spot as the worst drafting team in the NFL. To be able to best the Browns here is honestly quite impressive. So why don't we go back to 2012 and retrace what exactly has happened in New York? Entering the 2012 draft, the Jets were coming off an 8-8 season where they failed to make the playoffs after 2 straight AFC Championship appearances. Those teams were mostly built upon their tenacious defense, which had taken a step back in 2011. Looking to reload that unit, the Jets selected defensive end Quentin Coples in the first round. Coples was a disappointment who only lasted 4 years in the NFL. In the second round, the Jets made a trade to move up with the opportunity to pick one of the players they needed, either a receiver or linebacker. They decided to wait on the linebacker till later and selected wide receiver Stephen Hill. Hill only lasted 2 seasons, amassing less than 600 career yards. Within the next 5 picks, they missed out on Pro Bowl receiver Alshon Jeffrey and a linebacker Bobby Wagner, who is destined for the Hall of Fame. Entering the third round, former Jets executive Terry Bradway was adamant that the team needed to reevaluate the team's quarterback situation. He felt that Russell Wilson was going to be the steal of the 2012 draft. Bradway was such an avid supporter of Wilson that the others in the building nicknamed him Russell Bradway. But the GM went against his wishes, staying in place and selecting linebacker Demario Davis. Now, Davis has actually had a solid career, but considering who they picked before and who they could have had, it's just one of many what-ifs that haunt Jets fans. This 2012 class would receive a negative grade according to ESPN, and this would begin a string of bad drafts that no one involved with the Jets can be proud of. 2013, with the 9th overall pick, the Jets looked to replace Darrelle Revis with corner Dee Milliner. Milliner played 2 years in the NFL and ranks dead last in career AV among first-rounders from that year. This class as a whole scored worse than the year before. 2014, once again, the Jets went with another DB, Calvin Pryor, 18th overall. Pryor only played for the Jets for 3 seasons and ranks close to the bottom among that year's first-rounders. With 12 picks in 2014, the Jets only produced 3 that ever started, none of which lasted very long at all. Overall, this class is one of the worst of any team in that entire decade. 2015, the Jets actually hit on their 6th overall pick, Leonard Williams. He developed into a solid pro, but for the rest of this class, they almost made 0 impact, thus resulting in another below-average draft for the Jets. 2016, once again, the Jets would go on to miss on another defensive first-round pick, Darren Lee. Lee only started in New York for 3 seasons, which included a year where he ranked out as the 87th of 88 linebackers in the NFL. And somehow, the Jets' second-round pick in 2016 was even more embarrassing than their first. They selected quarterback Christian Hackenberg, who, as far as I can tell, was the only second-round quarterback since 1994 to not play in a single game. Even with some decent mid-round picks, the Jets once again scored a negative grade for the 5th straight year. 2017, this felt like a turning point, at least briefly. The Jets actually hit on their first and second round picks, with Jamal Adams and Marcus May, who instantly became key starters in their defense. The rest of this draft, however, was awful, as none of them made it past year 2. But with some of the key defensive pieces to build around, it was time to fix the offense in the next draft. With the 3rd overall pick, they had a big decision to make.
With the 3rd pick in the 2018 NFL Draft, the New York Jets select Sam Darnold, quarterback, USC.
They say whiffing on a quarterback can set a franchise back years. Sam Darnold within 3 years proved to not be the answer. He was a turnover-prone mess, made much worse with pathetically bad coaching. Going back to that 2018 class, Darnold was a bust, and the class as a whole resulted in yet another negative grade. ESPN went on to grade all the way through the 2021 NFL Draft, but as we get closer to present day, it's still pretty early as to whether or not some of these players will pan out. So the grades closer to today are just not as reliable. But among these classes, there's one pick in particular that must be talked about.
With the 2nd pick in the 2021 NFL Draft, the New York Jets select Zach Wilson, quarterback, BYU.
At this point in the video, I just feel bad for Jets fans. 9 straight below average classes are a huge reason as to why they haven't been in the playoffs since 2010. Then, to miss badly on not just one early first-round quarterback, but 2 in 3 years, well, that's just cruel. Zach Wilson in just 2 NFL seasons has already been labeled a bust. Most loyal Jets supporters are ready to move on. With so many swings and misses by a team, you just begin to wonder how much of it is on the players and how much of it is on the rest of the organization. As a fan who's very aware of what a losing culture looks like, the negative effects of bad management, bad coaching, and just bad energy cannot be understated. Fans of a losing culture are quick to lose patience with anyone and everyone when they've been dealing with it for decades. Just imagine being a 21-year-old kid who gets drafted to a team that constantly loses, everyone's fed up, and you're expected to be the savior. It usually doesn't end well. And even for the guys who do flourish, they usually don't stick around or are traded for future draft capital. But for Jets fans, if you're still watching, I'll end with something positive. Here's the beauty of pro football. With one solid hire and one solid draft, things can begin to shift. Robert Saleh has brought a resurgent energy to the building, which helped the Jets start 7-4 last season despite their issues at quarterback. This was aided by the fact that the Jets hit big in last year's draft. Their 2 first-round picks were Sauce Gardner, the Defensive Rookie of the Year, and Garrett Wilson, who led all rookies in receiving yards. This is still an unknown, but if Aaron Rodgers happens to be traded to New York, then Jets fans might get a little taste of what a franchise quarterback looks like. And at that point, anything is possible.
On the fake, Rodgers lets it fly, has Watson.